Okay, I think we can start. Very sorry that we are running late. Would like to welcome you to today's panel on youth and intergenerational justice. I would like to welcome also warmly those that are following us live through the web stream. There are many who are registered for this meeting online. Before introducing the panelists, I would like to set a bit the scene as a moderator for today's panel by pointing to two indicators that are actually quite worrying when it comes to democracy and trust, which, as you have seen in the previous session, the decrease in trust among young people, but then also the decline in satisfaction with democracies among youth cohort. And I think the most important point here is that we are not only talking about a decline in absolute terms, but in relative terms as well. So the trust survey from the OECD shows that young people tend to have less trust in government than their parents. And this, of course, is very worrying because we all know, as we always say, without trust, no policy, no reform will be sustainable enough to build the future that our citizens want. And in this context, the OECD has recently adopted the recommendation on creating better opportunities for young people. Spread the news. This is the gold standard that the OECD has just recently adopted on what it takes to empower young people and to improve their well-being. And in today's panel, what we would like to do most specifically is to discuss with you what it takes to concretely implement the recommendation of this recommendation into practice that is partly also done in coordination under the direction of the OECD Public Governance Committee, and what it takes to place young people really at the heart, at the center of reinforcing democracy and building trust. And we will do so by addressing three main topics. The first one is removing barriers and promote youth participation in democratic processes and decision-making. The second one is what can be done to deliver specifically to vulnerable groups. And finally, addressing intergenerational inequalities and integrating an intergenerational lens in policymaking. And for this, I have really the pleasure to have an extremely distinguished panel with me, and I would like to introduce them to you. It's Frédéric Picavet. He is the Vice President from the European Youth Forum. Liam Bremer, the Secretary General of the National Youth Council from Luxembourg. Piet Bach, he is the National Secretary of OGBL, Independent Trade Union Confederation Luxembourg, and also a member of TUAC. Jana Tichakova, the ministry expert for public governance in the Ministry of Interior from the Czech Republic, and Matthias Gruden, who is joining us virtually. He's the Director of Democratic Participation from the Council of Europe. So we have a first round of intervention, and then I will open the floor for questions. And I will start with Frédéric from the European Youth Forum. Frédéric, OECD evidence shows that young people continue to be underrepresented in public and political life. Results of the trust survey show that older people are far more likely to vote than younger people, and this is of course even more pronounced now with population aging, which will continue to decrease the weight of younger people in the political discourse and in election. As you have seen in the panel description, only 22% of members of parliament are younger than 40, and in some OECD countries, the workforce is also less than 5% of the central workforce is younger than 35 years. Frédéric, what can the European Youth Forum and governments do to strengthen young people's association with democracy and also embed a more intergenerational perspective in policymaking?
Thank you so much. And first of all, thank you for inviting me to this panel. So I'm Frédéric from the European Youth Forum. And for those who don't know the European Youth Forum, it's the platform of youth organizations in Europe that represents the voices of young people towards the European institutions. And our members are both national youth councils throughout the European continent and international youth organizations. So on this question you're asking, I think, first of all, it's a multi-layered problem. And it's has not an easy answer. But more than that, I want to also break the image of the fact that young people are not involved in society. Because that image is just not wrong. It's just wrong. It's just not right. And it also sees young people as one monolith, as one group. For example, I am going to give you some figures. Youth activism levels in Europe are very high. We know the Fridays for Future movement. You probably have seen and heard Greta Thunberg. Have you ever seen such a young activist in the streets in the last few decades? We see that 61% of young people in the EU are involved in some sort of youth club. Members of young people are part of youth organizations. And then let me go back to the European elections of 2019. The elections of 2019, we have seen higher turnouts than in 2014. It came from 41% to 51%, which is still low. I'm coming from Belgium. We see a turnout there of 90% because of the obligatory way you need to go to the booth to vote. You don't need to vote, but you need to go to the booth. That's an obligation in Belgium. But we can see that for those European elections, there was a youth wave, it was framed in the media. A youth wave which actually was the cause of the fact that the turnout in the 2019 elections was very, very high, and that actually breaks with the pattern and the image that we have of young people not being active in democracy. So actually the 2019 elections, they show differently. But let me go more into depth. Do any of you know in the European Parliament how many people are called Martin? How many people are called Martin? Like a figure? Like 10 people are called Martin, 20, 2, 6 people are called Martin. Why is that important? Like all of you are frowning at me at the moment. Did I misunderstood Martin? What is he saying? Why is that important? Because there are more Martins in the European Parliament than young people under 35 years old. Right? Okay, so think about that. Think about that. And it's not because young people, they don't want to be active in the society, but it's not easy for young people to become active in parliaments. For example, in Italy, there are still laws that prohibit young people to run for elections. And when young people don't see resemblance of people in the parliament to them, it's more difficult to vote for somebody that is not resembling to you. We all know how this goes. So this is important because we see that young people are not in the European Parliament so often. And now another question to you. We all in the European Union, we have leaders leading us, head of states, prime minister. How old is the average leader in the European Union? Any? Somebody? Come on. 50. Go up. 65? 62. Average leader is 62. So when I talk to my friends and when I want to invite them into being active into politics, when the average leader is that old, it's not so much that they are not a symbol of good governance and everything that we want in a leader, but it's difficult to relate to that person. And that's one of the main reasons when I talk to young people in the streets, why are we not so much active into politics? Because we don't resemble to the people who are in power. And this is something that is really an issue, I believe. And another thing, we are active in society in other ways. It's not only being active in democracy and in voting every 5 years. We are active in way more other ways, for example, being part of climate marches, for example, being part of a youth movement, being part of a youth club, being part in youth politics, and we should not forget about that. I promise to keep it short, so I will. I want to tackle one more thing. I want to tackle how it can be possible to have intergenerational justice in society. How can we ensure that the world we leave behind is also good for the generations behind us, because that's what we're all thinking about when looking at this climate crisis. A question for you. Who of you has been young? Who of you? Come on. Who? Hands? Everybody, right? Did you care when you were young about youth policy? Did you care about climate? Did you care about fiscal policy? Environment? Climate, environment? Labor market conditions? I think some of those questions you say yes to, others no. The issue with what we're having as European Youth Forum is that we're only invited to talk about youth issues. However, we are also very interested in economic issues, in climate issues, and everything else. So what are we proposing to the European Union? And this is on the table of the European leaders right now, and it's also up to the presidency of the European Union to take that on board. It's a youth test. We want to make new laws in the European Union youth-friendly. And how to do that? To have a youth test. And the youth test, it composes of 3 elements. First of all, to assess every new law on which impact it has on young people. Second of all, when it has a negative impact on young people, to have consultations with youth stakeholders and with young people. And then third of all, if we see that it has negative impact, and on the consultations we see that actually the law could also be written without having those negative impacts, to have mitigation measures in place. And we are asking this because this year, you're all quite European active, I assume. This year, 2022, is the European Year of Youth, and everybody is asking me and our organization, so what do you think should be a legacy of the Year of Youth? And I think this could be a true legacy of the Year of Youth. And with that, I'm going to leave it because there's also very interesting other speakers on this panel. But thank you so much.
No, thank you so much, Frederick. And you were pointing to management tools on how to bring in a youth lens, like the impact assessment tools, the youth test. And many of the OECD countries have experimented with it. And there's also one country, the Netherlands, that have introduced a generation test that is looking at the impact of laws on different age cohorts, not only the young. And I think that these are very promising policy tools to really think a bit more broadly on how policies are affecting differently the different age groups. And I would like now to turn to Liam, because Liam is a Secretary General of the Luxembourg National Youth Council, and we have basically heard from you, Frederick, that it is extremely important to engage youth also from, let's say, from the impact perspective. This is always the question that we are getting from in the OECD. What difference does it actually make to engage youth? And our evidence shows that the more you involve young people systematically in the policy-making process, the higher is also the satisfaction of the youth with the policy outcome. So this is an extremely important business case. However, our data shows that countries are still facing significant challenges to reach out to those that are hard to reach, so the most vulnerable groups. And that's a question for Liam, what the National Youth Council in Luxembourg is doing to bring in diverse backgrounds into the debate, and what you are also expecting from governments to really reach out to those that are usually hard to reach.
Absolutely. It is a big pleasure to be part of this panel today. I could perhaps very quickly start with giving you the context of what a National Youth Council is and what we are doing in Luxembourg. So we are the umbrella organizations of all the youth organizations within Luxembourg. It's currently 31, ranging from youth political parties to the young section of unions. And what we have been working on is advocacy work, but also supervising and organizing participatory processes involving young people in Luxembourg and on the international level. And we are also member organizations of the European Youth Forum. So the figures have been given that indeed it is a reality, an empirical reality, that the trust of young people in government and authorities has been decreasing over the last decades. And this is especially true for young people with a disadvantaged backgrounds. So just from that perspective, it is very important to reach out to them and to make them participate in the processes, because what we can see today is that it is notably people with university education and so on and so forth that are participating, and this has to change in order to get the trust of these parts of society up as well. To give a bit of an environment in which we are working currently in Luxembourg. Luxembourg is, as you've probably heard when speaking French, German, English, or Luxembourgish outside of this room, is very international. We have a foreign population, but a part of the population that does not hold Luxembourgish citizenship is 47%. Also, the linguistic characteristics of the population are very diverse. And afterwards, despite having the highest income per capita in the European Union, Luxembourg is also a quite unequal country, and this also has the effect of young people. So when it comes to the approaches that we as NYC have been following in order to get to these people, there's obviously, first of all, the institutional one. So this would mean that government authorities, or also we as NYCs, are approaching organized youth and youth organizations in order to get their opinion, to hear the voices of their members, so that they can shape policy. However, if we are having a look, and I'm going to quote from one of a paper that we actually published last year, one of the problems that we see is that the current youth organization environment is dominated by certain groups. First of all, 75% of the association declared that they had been founded by people of Luxembourgish nationality. Most of them were founded during the 70s and the 80s, where the Luxembourgish population was still majority-wise people with a Luxembourgish passport, and also the dominant languages were Luxembourgish and also French. And then lastly, also 79% of the organizations that we asked stated that they were actually using Luxembourgish as the mission, as the language of communication, clearly showing that there's a disproportion between the two. On the one side, the reality, the demographic reality, and the realities within the organizations. So what we have been doing is that next to the pillar of institutional engagement, we have also been reaching out directly to young people, and especially trying to get to young people of disadvantaged backgrounds. This is not easy, also for an NYC, and I think that policymakers and also national youth councils are sharing the same problems in this regard. What we have been seeing is that it is very crucial to reach out into existing infrastructure, into existing platforms, such as schools and such as youth centers. And this has been the way, for instance, in the context of the European Youth Conference, where we were able to organize focus groups and really to get into connection and get into communication with these people. One of the problems that we are seeing is that the accessibility, first of all, for us to get into schools is imperfect and often depends on the willingness of the different directorates of the school for us to do so. And this is often the case that it is the classical high schools, as we call it them in Luxembourg. So it is the highest one in the way to get a classical education, where we can go, whereas for the other it is not the case. And then when it comes to youth centers, it also not only depends on their willingness, but what we can see is that they are not equally developed in all parts of Luxembourg, and often it is correlated with the areas, geographical areas, where there's a high income, so it is often disadvantaged people that do not have access to them. So what would be my recommendations for policymakers to keep it short? A lot is about funding. First of all, it is about funding for NYCs, for us to be able, for instance, to organize focus groups and other gatherings where we can allow to have multiple languages, where we can also allow for young people and also to send them on international events, so that they are not dependent on their own financial capacities to go there. And then when it comes to the youth structures in schools, first of all, for the youth structures, it is of utmost importance that they have proper funding, that they have the right amount of people, that they have people with the right skills and also linguistic ones. And then afterwards, when it comes to schools, especially with COVID, we have seen that the access has been decreasing. And so we believe that there must also be a legal framework that allows youth associations and associations in global to enter schools and to organize a dialogue within them so that we can reach out to disadvantaged youth there.
Great, thank you. So you pointed mainly to a multi-channel approach, not to rely on one source to reach out and to go the extra mile, but definitely also the important aspect to have the financial resources to engage and also less legal barriers. The other thing that, of course, needs to be taken into account is what skills young people need to meaningfully engage in consultations or in these processes. And I would like to turn this question actually to our speaker who's joining us online, Matthias Gruden, who's the Director of Democratic Participation from the Council of Europe. Matthias, what do you think are the key elements to ensure that young people have a meaningful role in functioning democracies? We have seen, obviously, the importance of volunteering and youth work increasing in this regards, but also civic and citizens education. But we would really like to hear also more from the Council of Europe on what it really takes to empower young people to acquire the skills that they need to exercise their democratic rights.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to this panel to discuss this very important subject. The Council of Europe has more than 50 years now, or about 50 years of experience of working on youth policies with young people. And I think that's, I'd like to stress, very important. It's a very important example of how this can be done at an international level. We've been engaging, and our policy making is based on co-management, which is actually a participatory budgeting form of involvement of youth organizations in the work of the Council of Europe on youth issues. But I think it is also after 50 years, it is important to change the paradigm on how we look on youth work. To respond directly to your question about the elements which are necessary, they're relatively easy to identify and more difficult to achieve them. Competence and skills are clearly among them. Motivation related also to trust in institutions, which have already been mentioned, are also important. And of course, nothing can be done without real, genuine opportunities for young people to participate. Some of them are easy to achieve than others. None of them are very easy. The problem is that you need them all in order for the whole system to work, because, of course, motivation without opportunities will lead to frustration. This is something that we very often see. But on the other hand, opportunities without trust are also not going to work. When we talk about how to bring a change, a qualitative change into that situation, about changing the paradigm, I think that the Council of Europe, I would describe the philosophy behind our work as, if I can use a sentence that I think is going to irritate immediately a number of people in the panel and probably also in the audience, the very often, very broadly used, very popular I think in that sentence, there's a lot of the problems that are reflected with regard to what we are doing wrong and what we're not doing sufficiently well, but also perhaps some of the ways forward. If we look at it critically, almost psychoanalytically. First of all, when we say young people are our future, we are projecting the whole discussion into the future. But this is not just about future. It is first and foremost about today. It's about today's realities of the young people, the problems they're living, challenges, the social, economic, political, all the other challenges that we are all going through, we are all facing, but somehow young people are exposed to them and affected by them as a rule disproportionately. So it's not about the future only, it is about today. I think that's an important element. The second one, when we say they are our future, we somehow almost make it about ourselves. And about ourselves, I mean the non-young population, to put it mildly, those who are in the driving seat of all economic, social, political, institutional processes performing not too brilliantly. I think we would all agree. On that element, is it about us or is it about young people? I think that it is first of all, we need to reject that egoistic and egotistic understanding that is about us, not about them. It is about young people. It is about recognizing their interests, their expectations, their rights. But I think it's also very important in changing that paradigm to recognize that it's about all of us. That we start looking at the necessity to reinforce dramatically the genuine opportunities for young people to participate in democratic life, not just because this is a nice thing to do for young people, not just because, and it is, an ethical imperative because it would be unjust not to do so, or democratic imperative because we cannot have a fully functioning democracy if an important segment of population is left aside. I think we also need to recognize that we simply won't be able, as societies, deal and respond effectively to a number or all of the challenges that we are facing today, from technological to environmental to social, political, all of them. We will not be able to find effective solution if we don't include, involve, benefit from the specific perspectives, experience, understanding, creativity, innovation that the young people bring, not just to the table of discussion, but to the decision-making processes. So I really think we can have a very utilitarian approach to this, and I think we could be, and we should be able to measure, on one hand, what are the benefits to the society as a whole in all these different areas when you have genuine participation of young people in the decision-making processes, or what are the costs where this is not so. And I think the OECD would be an organization ideally placed to provide some empiric evidence to something that I think we all recognize it's true. So I would conclude here. Just one more point. Also, I think what we need to bear in mind is that, following what I said before, that everything that we are faced as society, young people somehow are affected disproportionately. The Council of Europe, the most recent recommendation of the Council, Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe in this area is about protecting youth, civil society and young people and supporting their participation in democratic processes. There are very many that was adopted this spring in March 2022. There are many elements that are very relevant to today's discussion which are there, but I just like to point out at one. In the turbulent world, turbulent Europe in which we're living today, where we are seeing the rise of nationalism, is one of the most directly and strongly affected. The space for civil society is shrinking, and we must not forget that much of the youth organization, youth participation is taking place as a civil society activity, and that again the impact and the threat that those political processes they're facing, which are affecting the young people, are again in many ways affecting them disproportionately. So I apologize if I was a little bit long, but I'll stop here. And if there are any questions later on, of course, I will be very pleased to respond.
Thank you very much, Matthias, for pointing to the opportunities to create better mechanisms for young people to get engaged, but also what skills they really need to have really to engage also with the public administration. I totally agree with you when you said that thinking about youth as a future is an outdated statement, and the juxtaposition doesn't help us any further, because if Frederick is the future, I am the past. But it's of course we together, and that's actually a nice also bridge to the next intervention to Jana, because she's from the Czech Republic, and the Czech Republic is currently holding the presidency and has identified the promotion of intergenerational dialogue. So that means young and old people together, and intergenerational justice as a key priority for the EU presidency. And Jana, maybe you can provide some examples of what the Czech Republic has done to advance precisely that agenda.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jana Ticháčková, and I'm working at the Ministry of Interior at the Department for Strategic Development and Coordination of Public Administration. And today I would like to share with you my point of view as a delegate to the OECD Public Governance Committee. And first of all, I would like to say that this is not a new topic. The OECD is addressing the youth engagement for already some time, but it is very closely connected, especially to the initiative to support democracy. We have heard many disturbing statistics and data, and maybe I also would like to introduce a little bit what we are doing with other delegates and together with the OECD. I don't know if you heard about the informal working group, which is called Friends of Youth. And it is a group where different delegates from different countries can participate. And since most of us are representatives from the Ministry of Interior, and we are not the experts on youth engagement, time by time we also organize like bigger meeting where we invite also representatives from the youth organizations or different NGOs and different experts. So it enables us like deeper dialogue about this topic. And the OECD expert team, with support of this working group, they have created very valuable reports with important evidence about young people, about what the governments can do to support them. And you have already heard that there has been also created the recommendation, which is great. And the Czech Republic is holding now the presidency in the EU Council, and we have been working closely with the OECD already since 2019. And when we were drafting our presidential document, where are all the goals related to intergenerational justice, we cooperated closely, and we used the recommendation or also other reports. And also the members of the OECD youth team, they participated at some of the events, for example, the first meeting of the working group on youth, or like big conference on youth that was taking place in July of this year. And the presence of the OECD representatives was very much welcomed, because they bring special knowledge to this topic. And just let me briefly mention what's the intergenerational dialogue or justice from our point of view. Like, the basic idea is that when we are creating new policies, we should incorporate this approach, because we have to think not only about benefits for the current generations, but also benefits for the future generations. We cannot create policies that will bring negatives for the future generations, for young people. And it's also about like support of the experts and the researchers to evaluate the data, like with from the point of view of different age groups. And also we are aiming at supporting the mutual dialogue between different age groups to like better understand their needs, or also like enable them to have the dialogue so they can have maybe more empathy for each other. And I also would like to mention that like our work is not ending, like the Czech presidency is ending in December. But also, like at the OECD, they are now preparing the toolkit that should like bring like more practical guidance how to implement the recommendation, because very often the OECD issues a recommendation on something. So we already know what we should do, but very often we are asking like how we should do it precisely. So we are very grateful for this platform that enables us also to share best practice and also to communicate with the youth organizations. And we are looking forward to the cooperation in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jana, also for pointing out the PGC's leading role in the elaboration of the youth recommendation. And yes, please watch out for the youth toolkit that is supposed to come soon to also learn more on how to implement the recommendation into practice. Jana, you also addressed the issue of intergenerational dialogue in inequalities, and I would like to really give you also a bit of evidence from the OECD that really shows that where in countries where you have low age-related inequalities, you have also much higher life satisfaction. This, of course, is an extremely important business case to reduce age-related inequalities. And I would like now to turn to Piet Bach, the National Secretary of the Independent Trade Union Confederation of Luxembourg and also member of the OECD TUAC, to explain a bit on how you perceive how inequalities can be reduced. But before that, I also want to cite one example from the OECD's good practices, because we have at least 9 OECD countries that have enshrined the rights of future generations in their constitution through clauses, for instance, related to general ecological or financial matters. That's, of course, a major breakthrough, and I would like to give the floor to you now, Piet, to present the trade union's view on that.
Ok, merci. Bon, tout d'abord, merci pour la parole, merci pour cette opportunité. Donc moi, je vais me permettre de vous adresser la parole en français. J'espère que c'est ok. Il y a une traduction qui est mise à votre disposition. Donc, bien sûr, bon, c'est important de parler des inégalités intergénérationnelles, et je pense que pour le faire, il faut absolument parler des causes des inégalités. Hein. Donc, on l'a dit. Premièrement, il faut parler des causes, mais deuxièmement aussi, on en a déjà parlé, il faut absolument parler d'une participation active, d'un renforcement d'une participation active justement des jeunes, parce que, et c'est peut-être pas surprenant que je dise ça en tant que syndicaliste, mais quand on augmente la participation active des personnes concernées, on diminue toujours les inégalités. Au niveau des causes, je pense que pour commencer au début, il faut absolument parler d'un accès équitable à la formation. Donc je pense que là, dès le plus jeune âge, là, les inégalités peuvent se former, et si elles se forment à ce niveau-là, elles risquent bien sûr de s'amplifier par la suite. Donc il faut absolument que les gouvernements combattent les causes qui créent des inégalités au niveau de l'accès à la formation. Ceci, on peut le faire justement en mettant à disposition les ressources nécessaires, comme des allocations familiales, par exemple, qui sont indexées au coût de la vie, mais aussi des bourses d'étudiants, mais avant tout aussi de garantir des stages en entreprise qui sont rémunérés, des rémunérations décentes justement pour les stages en entreprise, pour permettre aux jeunes d'avoir un accès à ce niveau de formation. Quand on parle maintenant de stages rémunérés, on parle bien sûr aussi d'emploi décent. Donc il faut absolument, si maintenant un jeune fait la transition vers la vie active en entreprise, il faut absolument combattre les causes des emplois précaires. Au Luxembourg, on a maintenant, après la crise du Covid-19, on a en 2021 une augmentation de 45,9% des contrats à durée déterminée, donc des CDD. Ce sont des contrats des contrats à durée déterminée où principalement des jeunes sont concernés et qui risquent bien sûr d'amplifier des risques d'emploi précaires. Après, bien sûr, on a le même phénomène pour les contrats intérimaires, où il faut absolument essayer d'éviter ce genre de relations contractuelles au niveau des salariés. Après, bien sûr, il y a de plus en plus de jeunes aujourd'hui qui tournent vers une économie informelle, donc qui commencent à proposer leurs services via des plateformes numériques. Ici, ni au Luxembourg, ni au niveau européen, on a un cadre législatif qui encadre vraiment les plateformes numériques, donc il faut absolument réagir par rapport à ça. Vous savez que les plateformes numériques ne garantissent pas les mêmes protections sociales pour les jeunes, ne garantissent pas forcément une rémunération régulière, une rémunération décente, donc il faut absolument créer des cadres juridiques, il faut réagir par rapport à ça, créer des cadres juridiques pour justement permettre aux jeunes d'avoir le même statut, un statut d'employé, les mêmes protections, les mêmes rémunérations qu'ils auraient sous un statut d'employé, de salarié. Après, quand on parle d'emploi précaire, on parle bien sûr par la suite d'un risque de pauvreté. Au Luxembourg, le risque de pauvreté chez les jeunes est de plus du double du risque de pauvreté pour les adultes. Donc ça, c'est un grand problème qu'il faut absolument combattre activement au niveau des gouvernements. Après, quand on parle de risque de pauvreté, on parle bien sûr d'un accès au logement. Au Luxembourg, et je pense que c'est le même cas dans beaucoup de pays, un accès au logement devient de plus en plus difficile pour les jeunes. Un accès au logement abordable. Ça, d'un côté, au Luxembourg, il y a un problème au niveau des logements justement pour les étudiants, des logements à proximité, des logements abordables à proximité de l'université. Mais de l'autre côté aussi, sur le marché libre de l'immobilier, un accès à un logement abordable pour même ceux qui ont un travail. Donc, il faut se dire que l'accès au logement est quand même une étape cruciale vers une plus grande indépendance des jeunes et notamment un grand risque aussi de tomber dans une précarité et donc de creuser davantage les inégalités intergénérationnelles. Après, on sort, j'ai envie de dire on sort, mais on a une crise du Covid-19 qui est encore très présente, qui a amplifié, qui a augmenté un autre risque ou une autre cause d'inégalité justement pour les jeunes, c'est notamment au niveau du bien-être. Donc les jeunes, il y a beaucoup d'études qui montrent que les jeunes ils sont plus concernés par des troubles mentaux. Au niveau de la dépression, il y a le Quality of Work, une étude de l'Université de Luxembourg qui a démontré quand même que la catégorie des 16 à 24 ans est le plus concernée par des risques de dépression. Risque de dépression, ça signifie aussi pensée suicidaire. Donc il faut absolument investir dans une prévention de troubles mentaux, dans une prévention des risques psychosociaux auprès des jeunes. Donc je l'ai dit au début, quand on parle justement de combattre les causes des inégalités, il faut absolument aussi intégrer les jeunes dans le processus. Il faut absolument renforcer une participation active des jeunes dans le processus. Moi, je vous parle en tant que syndicaliste, donc des organisations où des jeunes rentrent tout de suite dans un processus collectif où ils peuvent justement participer à des procédures démocratiques pour justement combattre ces inégalités à ces niveaux-là. Donc j'aimerais bien terminer avec peut-être une réflexion. On demande souvent aux jeunes leur avis que s'il s'agit de parler justement de leur participation dans d'autres sujets, mais quand on parle des sujets, on les invite très rarement. Merci.
No, absolutely. And thanks so much also for reminding us that young people are a heterogeneous group that is relying on a variety of public services, being housing, education, employment, health, you name it, and which can also be the root causes for inequalities. And more important, therefore, it is to have a united vision, let's say a national youth strategy that is binding the different sectors together. But it also means what are the governance mechanism at the disposal to coordinate across portfolios, something that we and the OECD are also looking at on how this can best be coordinated across the administration. I'm terribly sorry, we are running a bit of time, and if you all agree, I would like to open the floor now so that you have a chance to talk, and I would like to benefit very much from the privilege to have Mario Nava also among the audience to give you first the floor to explain a bit what DG Reform is doing as a priority topic to engage young people and support intergenerational dialogue.
Okay, well, thank you very much. First of all, thank you to Frederick, because I've discovered I am a decade younger than the average European leader. So this is the best news of the day, and it's really fantastic. Second, I think it's very much what you said at the very end, that if you want to address the youth, you don't only have to address only with one or two or three policies. Actually, it's a panoply of policies. As you know, today, this year, rather, is 35 years that we have the Erasmus program. If there is one thing I'm very proud is that I did the very first Erasmus, 1st of September 1987 in Paris. And you look at what it was doing in Erasmus 35 years ago and what it was today. First, for a start, there were no planes. Low cost didn't exist, so you went with a train. Second thing, of course, there was no euro. And you needed to change the money. And in order to change the money, you needed to make a declaration à la Banque Centrale, de pourquoi on a besoin de l'argent pour aller en France, which was self-evident, but still you needed to declare it. You couldn't phone, because a phone call of 15 minutes costed like a day wage, not of a young, but of my father. My father had a normal job, and 1 day wage of him was 15 minutes of a phone call from Milan to Paris. All these things, I think Europe has eliminated. We've put competition into telephone, into communication, into all of that, and we have made Europe accessible. Having said all of that, this, of course, is far from being enough, and everything I've heard there really talks to me, even if I'm a little bit older than you, but not as old as the average leader. And what else can we do? Now, if you look what we have done, for example, only in the last 2 years. Last year was the year of childhood, European Child Guarantee Year, and this year is the year of Youth First. And under Youth First, we have a series of initiatives, Fit, Instructed, and so on and on, which all have to do with work. And with the OECD and with other international organizations, DG Reform is really going to work with the member states to address the various needs. So in one member state, for example, is the issue of making sure that education is enough inclusive. In another member state, for example, is the issue of making sure that the migrants, someone of you said it, no? Luxembourg, half of the population does not have a Luxembourgish passport, but still is super well integrated and it works well into the social and economic fabrics and all of that. So I believe we need to continue to keep this focus on the youngsters, not for the future, for today. That's what we do with the Next Generation EU. The Next Generation EU is very much for now and for the future. But we shouldn't be under the illusion that there is one silver bullet. Actually, there is not, and it's the panoply of many things that we need to do. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much for your contribution. And I think I'm looking at Gillian, but you agree that we can take 1 or 2 questions from the audience? Okay, so so I'm looking at you. Someone wants to ask a question to the panelists? Okay, yeah. I'm coming. Maybe you can also introduce yourself before you ask the question.
Hi, hello, yeah. Hi, I'm John Parkhouse. I'm here as a representative of BIAC, so the employee side of things. And I just wanted to come back on the opening comment that you made in terms of the age of leaders and youth not recognizing themselves in leaders. You know, frankly, when I think 65 is probably a little bit on the high side, but, you know, in terms of actually having capable leaders, do you not think that actually you really need a lot of experience a maturity that is actually going to be coming to the fore. And there are very exceptional people that can get there very early, right? Macron being an example. But if I analogize it to the world of business, if you take your average CEO, which is sort of an equivalent of a member of parliament, I would say, in different companies, you know, oftentimes it takes a long time to get the skills that you need to be effective in that position. So my question, okay, that's my assertion, okay? You probably disagree with it, but that's my assertion. My question is, would you agree with that as an assertion? And secondly, if you would agree with that, is there not a more effective way to realistically get the voice of youth heard in the key policy areas more systematically, rather than relying on exceptional people to get there very fast?
Great. There was another question from Marie Hanafi.
Thank you very much. Hello, my name is Mary Hannafin from Ireland. I was a cabinet minister, but I'm currently the mayor of my county. And in the last local elections, a number of young candidates, particularly for the Green Party, were elected, which was wonderful. But since then, because of employment opportunities or having to move house or education responsibilities, they have given up their positions on the council. So my question really is, what do we as mayors and ministers need to do to support those who actually are courageous enough to stand for election and get elected to keep you there?
Great. I think at the front row there was also a question. That's the last one. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Thank you very. Can you hear me? Yes, thank you very much. My name is Anne Goedet. I'm the Human Rights Ambassador from Luxembourg. I'm very pleased and thank you very much for this very interesting panel. Actually, more a comment or an example of something we are doing, and which I think I'm very proud of, and which is working quite well, is we have at the General Assembly of the United Nations, we have youth delegates who participate in New York in those debates. They are giving and they are drafting their own statements and presenting them and tweeting about them, and I think that gets quite a lot of resonance as well, and it's very inspiring for other young people, but for us as well, I think, less young persons. So I think it's very important to give a voice and a place and a show, and that's what we try to do. It's just a little example, but I think it illustrates quite well. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much for the example from the UN. And I now turn the questions to, I think they were mainly addressed to you, Frédéric and Liam, if you would like to answer the question from Biak and from Marie.
Yes, thank you so much. First of all, on the question on business and experienced leaders, I would say I have a layered answer, but the first answer I would give is that a young person is experienced in being young. And maybe he or she or they are not experienced in being a leader, a world leader, or being a politician, but it's a matter of perspective. And if there would already be in the modern world a lot of young Europeans being a leader and then seeing already that that is not working, I would say, true. Let's think about this, let's investigate, but I'm not sure how much, for example, the OECD has collected data on how trust in young leaders are and how trust in older leaders are. I can see the Prime Minister of Finland pointing very well the feeling of our generation in the war. Ukraine is fighting against Russia, is making her young and being female, her not experienced. I think that is a belief of the past. However, let's see in the future, maybe there will be some more leaders. But if I'm not mistakenly, I think there was one great leader 2,000 years ago. He conquered a lot of the eastern part from Turkey on, which was not called Turkey back then. It was Alexander the Great. He was 19 years old. I'm not sure if many of us would say that he was a bad leader. Then also business and politics. Comparing those is tricky, I would say. And sorry, I'm going to wrap it up. But business and politics, comparing those, it's tricky because about business, it's indeed about also experience, and experience weighs way more there than, for example, in politics, because a lot of politicians have not done politics before they went into politics. Some of them are career politicians, true, but into politics you need to voice the voice of people. And for example, what I don't see in the opinions today is where my generation is concerned about. It's about biodiversity loss. It's about the possibility of home ownership. It's about the ways in which the COVID-19 pandemic has affected young people's mental health. It's about fake news. It's about the rise of extreme right-wing movements all across the continent. And I don't see in my Prime Minister or in European leaders those concerns that are my concerns being voiced. And let's talk about more about this in the break, maybe, because I think it's very interesting. But that would be my take. And I will leave the other two questions to other people. And thank you for the question.
Yeah, also just to add on this, I think that, as Frederick said, like the business of government and the business and the private ones are fundamentally different. And especially when it comes to elected people, it's not their role to be competent. I think we wish them to be, but first of all, they should represent the opinions of the population, and this also includes young people. And if this is not the case, we can come up with very competent, very complex policy solutions, but to the wrong problems, and then we won't solve the right things. And this is, I think, what we are seeing today. If we are having a look into the room, we have a lot of competent people. Often they just don't know what are the actual problems, what are the opinions of young people and of the population in general.
Great. I think we are coming to the end of this panel. Gillian is already getting angry with me. Huh? No, but the others are waiting. Huh? After that, okay, good. No, I would like to really thank you all for this very inspiring panel. Mario for joining from the floor, Piet, Jana, Liam, and Frederick, and also, of course, Matthias virtually. I think what it has really shown that there is much more space for debating, and I hope that this can be a series in the Global Forum in the future. And with this, I give the floor to Gillian to make the announcement for the next panel. Huh? Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Miriam, and thank you to all the wonderful panelists. I have to say that some of the best ministers I've ever worked with have been young, so there's definitely space there. I just wanted to let people know where the next panels are, because I understand it wasn't particularly clear for this first round. So in here, there will be the session on green governance. Downstairs in the plenary room will be the session on Ukraine, the main room that we were in this morning. And then in room D, which is right along the other end of the walkway out of here, will be the session on, where are we now, women's participation. The idea is to start those sessions at past, so you have 15 minutes to make your way there. Thank you.